But then something terrible happened. Man was tempted. Man gave in to temptation. And sin entered the world as a result of Adam's and Eve's actions, in which our created nature, which was goodness, became corrupted by sin. And as a result, we're not capable, as we think we are, at being able to demonstrate goodness in our lives. And Paul writes about this in his primary struggle in Romans 7, 17 through 21, where Paul says, as it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, I do. This I keep doing. Now if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. I find this law at work. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. You see, what Paul is describing in these 4 verses, and really, if you were to read the entire 7th chapter of Romans, is that Paul says that I want to do good. There's that inherent quality of wanting to do good. But the problem becomes, as Paul says, that I want to do it, but then sin is living in me. And I want to do good, but then sin springs up within me and causes me to do evil. That there is the inclination of wanting to do good, but sin is there present to prevent me from the goodness that I want to happen to take place. This is denoting a habit of acting on the sinful desires and neglecting the good which we all want to do. And so the idea Paul is putting forth is we only do good when it is convenient for us to do so. And when we think that we are doing good, it is only a temporary moment in which we get ever so briefly to live for the glory of God by doing goodness for others. But it is a brief temporary moment because sin is right there. It springs up and we backslide. We fall into temptation and our sinful desires of our sinful nature. And so Paul is describing this inherent goodness within us that is being constantly at tug of war with the evil and sinful desires. So we remember what Paul said when we first started to look at Galatians 5, at the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5:17. Paul describes 2 desires that are present within our lives. He describes the fruit of the Spirit, and then he describes the fruit of the flesh, which we have come to know as the sinful desires. In Galatians 5:17, Paul says, "For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want." This sums up what Paul was talking about in his letter to the church in Romans, in Romans 7. That there's that tug of war constantly at work with us. We want to do good. We want to let goodness be present in our lives. We want to be inherently good, referring to the goodness which God naturally created within us in the beginning. But which the problem becomes, the original sin springs forth. And we now have the knowledge to decide for ourselves what goodness looks like. And we have allowed evil to come into our lives and work within us to create our own conception of what goodness really is and what evil really is. Our knowledge of good and evil causes us to not have the fruit of goodness present in our lives. And so therefore we struggle with evil which is at work within us. And when we want to do good, sin springs up in us. And when we only have sin springing up in us, we only do good things, or goodness is on display in our lives, which only benefits us to do them. So rather than doing the good things that we want to do, we begin to look for the selfish things in our lives. The things that we can do which will gain honor and praise for the self, that will benefit our sinful desires rather than benefit those around us. So when Paul is talking about the fruit of the Spirit, he's talking about why goodness needs to be present in our lives. It's because when we're walking with the Holy Spirit, we are reminded of our inherent goodness which we were created with. This call and guiding us back to God so that we might be able to do good work, that we are able to avoid the pitfalls of sin, in order that we can show the world what true goodness looks like. And this only happens when we are walking with the Spirit. And the fruit of goodness begins to take shape and be apparent in our lives. So if agathos is inherently good, that is the natural ability within us that has been placed there with God for goodness, that has been corrupted by sin, then the fruit of goodness in our life is to turn our attention back to God. And Paul describes this action by turning back to God when he describes the fruit of goodness in Galatians 5:22. The funny thing about the word he uses to describe the fruit of goodness, it only appears in the New Testament 4 times. In fact, this word is actually used so little in Greek in general that the word for goodness is designated as strictly appearing in the Bible and does not appear anywhere else in Greek text. And the word for goodness only appears in the New Testament. It is a biblical term. And so the word that Paul uses is agathos